Welcome to your review for Doctor Who Season 2, Episode 4, Lucky Day. Ruby faces life without the Doctor, but when a terrifying new menace pops up, how can Unit and Conrad save the day? I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a very Ruby-centric Doctor Light episode again. Doctor Light episodes always seem to work very well within a series. But there is something more sinister, I think, when you contextualize and analyze this episode a bit more, at the core of this episode and what it means for future episodes in this series. So yeah, I found it quite interesting in terms of what sort of media context they deal with. Given that Conrad is a conspiracy theorist podcaster, he runs his own podcast called Lucky Day, and Ruby is a guest on the podcast. Now, there is a lot of misinformation and fake news out there at the moment within society, and this kind of gets churned out on platforms like Twitter and X and kind of these right-wing social media platforms such as like Truth Social and many others. But how they dealt with the topic of fake news and misinformation in this episode was quite cleverly handled. Ruby is obviously in a relationship with Conrad, and we see this throughout the episode. Again, a storyline that is kind of carried over from season 1 in 73 Yards. An older version of Ruby is on a date with a previous boyfriend. So it's kind of nice to see that kind of continued here with Conrad in this season. It turns out that Ruby needs to contact Unit in order to get this threat under control. The threat in this episode is the Shreek, which is an interesting villain, and I do hope we see more of it sometime soon. It turns out that Ruby gets in contact with Unit, tells Unit all about this mysterious threat that's happening in London, and it's kind of almost jeopardizing her relationship with Conrad and the relationship with Unit, and there's massive consequences for Kate and Unit in this episode with what she does later down the line. But this episode, it turns out that nearing maybe in the final act, we find out that Conrad was manipulating this entire scenario. So it turns out that the Shriek isn't exactly what we thought it would be, in that Conrad, it was all a setup and Conrad was the one behind it. Very cleverly done, and I liked how the story played out, and it has to be possibly one of the best episodes for me of this season. Now obviously it turns out that, or we find out that Unit is spreading lies about what they're hiding and how they're going about doing it, and Conrad is the one to sort of unmask what UNIT is doing to the general public, and obviously there's a massive smear campaign against UNIT for what it's doing to not actually helping the civilians, which is quite worrying, I suppose, because UNIT is supposed to be like a secretive, underground, nobody's supposed to know about it task force, and if you give UNIT a sort of a bigger presence than before, it kind of takes away from, you know, UNIT is supposed to be a secretive, earth-shattering, saving organisation from massive, unearthly events. So I'm kind of in two minds about whether UNIT should stay as a public entity where everybody knows about it, or whether it should go back to being a secretive underground organisation protecting Earth from ungodly threats. And I kind of have mixed feelings on that. But it turns out in the end that Conrad has this massive smear campaign against UNIT to get it kind of shut down in a way. It's kind of vaguely similar to how UNIT went out of action in Flux, but not as extreme. And it's a satisfying conclusion as well to the end of the episode. Now obviously there's consequences for Kate. Kate unleashes a real Shreek on Conrad. It was caged up in a box in UNIT HQ for years, and Conrad pays the ultimate price, I suppose. But it'll be interesting to see what sort of consequences this has on UNIT, and as Kate said, it'll be interesting to see where those consequences lead us in this series. Overall, I very much enjoyed this episode, and I wonder if we'll see Conrad again, and whether he has a bigger role to play in the overall season arc of this season. But yeah, do let me know what you thought of Lucky Day in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to as many of them as possible. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and I'll see you again in a new one. Bye for now.